Dyne just pulled off the Biotech two-step in Duchenne. On May 20, 2026, it started a confirmatory phase 3 trial. On May 26, 2026, it filed for FDA accelerated approval. That sounds like a victory lap. It is not. It is a regulatory stress test for one of the biggest questions in rare disease biotech right now. How much evidence is enough when the biology is plausible, the disease is brutal, and the field has already learned the hard way that speed does not remove risk? This video is about z-rostudirsen, Dyne's Exon 51 Duchenne program, and the angle is simple. Do not ask, did Dyne file? Yes, it filed. Do not ask, did Dyne start phase 3? Yes, it did. Ask the more useful question. What exactly got de-risked this week, and what absolutely did not? First, what changed? Dyne said on May 26, 2026, that it submitted a biologics license application to the US FDA for accelerated approval in Duchenne patients amenable to Exon 51 skipping. The company says the filing is based on dystrophin as a surrogate endpoint from the DELIVER study. 6 days earlier, on May 20, 2026, Dyne said it initiated FORZETTO, a 72-week global, randomized, placebo-controlled phase 3 trial meant to act as the confirmatory study for traditional approval in the US and also support ex-US filings. That sequence matters because this is exactly how accelerated approval is supposed to sound when a company wants to look prepared. Filing now based on a surrogate, running the confirmatory study in parallel. The FDA's own accelerated approval framework says the drug company still has to confirm actual clinical benefit after approval. If the confirmatory trial works, great. If it does not, the agency has procedures that can lead to withdrawal. So if you hear filed and mentally translate it to settled, stop doing that. Now let's decode the biology, because this is where a lot of public coverage gets thin. Duchenne is caused by mutations in the DMD gene that disrupt dystrophin, which muscle cells need for structure and function. Exon-skipping drugs try to restore a readable message by telling the cell to skip over a problematic exon during RNA processing, in this case, exon 51. The promise is not that you make perfect dystrophin. The promise is that you make enough usable dystrophin in enough relevant tissue to change how patients function. Dyne's pitch is that z-rostudirsen is not just another exon-skipping molecule with a nicer press release. It is a PMO linked to a fragment that binds transferrin receptor 1, which is supposed to improve delivery into muscle tissue and potentially the central nervous system. That is the mechanistic argument. Better delivery, more dystrophin, lower treatment burden with once every 4-week IV dosing. Reasonable thesis, still a thesis that has to survive regulators, payers, and confirmatory data.
The company's own data package is where the real tension sits. Dyne says the registrational expansion cohort of DELIVER showed a statistically significant dystrophin increase, and that functional improvement was observed across multiple clinical endpoints. The FORZETTO announcement also highlights an improvement in rise from floor velocity at 6 months versus pooled placebo, with a nominal p-value under 0.05. That is directionally encouraging, but this is also why you need discipline. The BLA is being filed on the surrogate. The confirmatory trial exists because functional benefit still needs to be nailed down in the way regulators can lean on long-term. And the safety and evidence context around Duchenne is not abstract anymore. On December 19, 2025, the FDA approved a boxed warning and narrowed the indication for Sarepta's Elevidys after reports of fatal acute liver injury. That does not mean exon skipping and gene therapy are the same modality. They are not. But it does mean the Duchenne regulatory atmosphere is not a playground. Safety language, indication boundaries, and post-approval evidence obligations are very real in this category. A faster path does not mean a softer path. This is also where the global angle matters. Dyne said FORZETTO is intended to support ex-US marketing applications, and the company already has orphan designation in the US, Europe, and Japan for this exon 51 Duchenne population. Translation: even if US accelerated approval happens, the broader commercial and access story still depends on how other regulators view the evidence package, how confirmatory data matures, and how payers respond to the eventual value story. What is the practical viewer takeaway? Grade this week in 3 buckets. Bucket 1. Execution credibility improved. Dyne did what it said it would do on timing. Bucket 2. Regulatory certainty did not magically appear. FDA still has to decide whether the filing is accepted, whether priority review is granted, and whether the surrogate package clears the bar. Bucket 3. Clinical proof is still incomplete. FORZETTO is not decorative, it is the hard part. What people may be missing is that this is not just a Dyne story, it is a live case study in how rare disease biotech tries to convert mechanistic plausibility into approvable evidence.
If z-rostudirsen succeeds, the lesson will not be file faster. The lesson will be that better tissue delivery plus cleaner execution can make a surrogate-backed filing more persuasive. If it stumbles, the lesson will be even more important. Filing momentum and phase 3 momentum can still be very different things. So what should you watch next? Watch for the FDA's filing decision and whether Dyne gets priority review. Watch FORZETTO enrollment and whether the trial stays clean operationally. Watch how the field talks about dystrophin because surrogate confidence is still the hinge. And watch whether global regulators and payer systems treat this as a convenience upgrade, a real efficacy upgrade, or a still unfinished evidence story. My opinionated wrap-up is this. Dyne had a meaningful week, but meaningful is not the same thing as proven. The headline is the filing. The real story is the evidence bar.